What if the pain you've been trying to avoid is the very key to becoming untouchable? Not because you become numb, not because you become cold, but because you finally become whole. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What if the people who hurt you were never the real source of your pain? What if it was something much closer, buried beneath your own skin? What if every heartbreak was never about them leaving, but about the part of you that believed you deserved to be left? What if the rejection that haunts you isn't about their choice, but about a wound so familiar you've mistaken it for your identity? Let's begin. You've been taught that strength means not feeling anything, that power means avoiding pain, staying silent, appearing unaffected. But that kind of strength is fragile, because the more you pretend you're unbothered, the more pain you hide, and what we hide grows stronger in the dark. The real danger isn't what others do to you. It's the emotional wounds you never acknowledged, the stories you keep telling yourself in silence. As Jung said, the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It grows stronger in silence, directing your choices from the darkness. And so we live reacting, not to what is, but to what's unresolved. The person who ghosted you didn't create your abandonment wound. They activated it. The insult that stung didn't come from them. It came from a belief that already existed within you. Every heartbreak is a mirror. Every betrayal is a map. Every conflict is a doorway. This is shadow possession, when what's buried inside governs what happens outside. We walk through life thinking others control our emotions, while unconsciously handing them the exact weapons that wound us deepest. And then we wonder why the same pain finds us, relationship after relationship, year after year. Jung recognized this pattern when he observed, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Your triggers aren't random. They're precisely calibrated to your unhealed wounds. 1. Emotional immunity doesn't come from avoidance. Pain isn't the enemy. Suppressing it is. Avoiding pain only turns it into a quiet dictator, running your choices, reactions, and relationships. Your psychological immune system, like your physical one, doesn't grow stronger by avoiding all threats, but through strategic engagement. This is your emotional vaccination. Conscious exposure builds resilience. We often think we're being strong by brushing it off, but brushing off isn't healing, it's burying. And what we bury doesn't die, it waits. It waits in your body as tension. It waits in your relationships as patterns. It waits in your life as recurring themes that seem to chase you no matter how far you run. When we numb our pain, we numb everything else too. We can't selectively block emotions. The wall that keeps out sorrow also blocks joy. The barrier against betrayal also prevents intimacy. As Jung wrote, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. We create elaborate psychological defenses to avoid necessary pain, but those very defenses create greater, more persistent suffering. The path to strength isn't through avoidance, but through conscious engagement. When you turn toward what hurts instead of away from it, you discover what the mystics have always known, that love is stronger than fear, that light is more powerful than darkness, and that your wounded places, once integrated, become your greatest gifts. 2. What hurts you reveals what still needs healing. Every overreaction is a wound asking to be seen. You're not over-emotional. You're overflowing with things you never had the space to process. Your strongest emotional triggers are not random. They're roadmaps. As the metaphor suggests, nothing and nobody can hurt you without your unconscious permission. That doesn't mean you're responsible for others' actions, but you are responsible for healing what they touched. The criticism that devastates you points to where you secretly criticize yourself. The rejection that unravels you reveals where you've rejected parts of yourself. The betrayal that seems unbearable shows where you've betrayed your own needs and boundaries. This is what Jung meant when he said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." Your most chaotic emotional reactions follow a pattern that, once recognized, becomes your personal map to freedom. Consider keeping a trigger journal. When you feel disproportionately hurt, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? When did I first feel this way? What belief about myself is being activated? These questions transform triggers from random emotional hijackings into precise diagnostic tools. The very things that hurt you most deeply become your most reliable guides to healing. 3. The illusion of external control. Trying to change others to feel safe inside is like trying to calm a storm by rearranging the clouds. You don't need to fix the outside, you need to understand your inside. You beg people to stop disrespecting you because a part of you still doubts you deserve respect. You chase love from others because you've never turned inward to give it to yourself. Until that loop is interrupted, you'll repeat it, over and over. As Nietzsche warned, trying to calm the ocean with your hands only exhausts you. This is the greatest prison we build, believing our peace depends on others' behavior. We give away our power thinking if they would just change. Stop criticizing, start appreciating, become more attentive, less demanding, then we could finally be happy. But even if they did change, the wound within would find new evidence to support its existence. Because the wound isn't about them, it never was. Jung understood this when he wrote, "No matter how much parents and grandparents may have sinned against the child, the man who is really adult will accept these sins as his own condition, which has to be reckoned with." This doesn't excuse harmful behavior. It transforms your relationship to it. When you stop demanding that others heal what only you can heal, you reclaim your sovereignty. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the author of your experience. True freedom isn't having control over others. It's no longer needing that control to feel whole. The persona is a prison. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to be liked, safe, accepted. But when you live through a mask too long, you forget who you really are. And the danger is this: you think the approval you get is love, but they're loving the mask, not you. Schopenhauer said we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves just to be like other people. And sometimes we call that forfeiture maturity, compromise, or even kindness. But kindness without boundaries is self-destruction dressed as virtue. The tragedy isn't just that others don't see you. It's that eventually you don't see yourself either. You become so good at being what others need that you lose touch with who you are. Your authentic voice grows quiet beneath the noise of expectations. Jung observed, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But this privilege demands courage, the courage to disappoint people, to be misunderstood, to stand alone when necessary." Your persona developed as protection, as adaptation. It served a purpose. But now it's time to ask, at what cost? What parts of yourself have you sacrificed at the altar of belonging? What gifts remain unexpressed because they don't fit the image you maintain? True belonging never asks you to betray yourself. The acceptance that requires your self-abandonment isn't acceptance at all. It's another form of rejection, this time with your consent. 5. Pain is a messenger. Your pain isn't here to punish you. It's here to point toward what still needs your attention, your love, your integration. Pain is not a punishment, it's a messenger. Listen to it. When rejection hurts, it reveals a part of you that equates value with being chosen. When disrespect stings, It reveals a belief that your worth depends on validation. You weren't born feeling unworthy. That came from somewhere. That pain has a lineage. Healing is your chance to end it. Notice how your body speaks when you're triggered. The tightness in your chest, the heat in your face, the heaviness in your stomach. These sensations aren't random. They're your body's language, telling stories your conscious mind might not be ready to hear. Jung recognized the body as the unconscious mind's physical counterpart. Your physical symptoms are symbolic communications, metaphors made flesh. The chronic back pain might be about burdens you've carried too long. The recurring throat tightness might be about words left unspoken. When you approach pain, emotional or physical, with curiosity instead of resistance, it transforms from enemy to ally. It becomes not something to escape, but something to explore, a darkened room containing treasures you've forgotten. Ask your pain, what are you trying to show me? What do you need me to understand? What would healing look like to you? Then listen, not with your analytical mind, but with your compassionate heart. 6. Emotional triggers are treasure maps. If someone can make you feel unworthy, it's because a part of you already believes them. Shadow work is learning to no longer agree. This is what Jung meant by the gold in the darkness. The shadow doesn't just hold pain, it holds power. Every rejection is a mirror. Every trigger is a map. Every heartbreak is a doorway. But only if you choose to walk through. The qualities in others that trigger you most intensely are often disowned aspects of yourself, parts you've rejected, repressed, or never developed. The arrogance that infuriates you might be pointing to. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to join us on this amazing journey. Your own unacknowledged need for recognition. The neediness that repels you might be highlighting your own unmet dependency needs. Jung called this projection, the unconscious transfer of psychological elements from yourself onto another person. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This doesn't mean you should tolerate mistreatment. It means even mistreatment can become a tool for self-knowledge when approached consciously. Consider creating a trigger inventory. List the behaviors in others that provoke your strongest reactions. For each one, ask yourself, how might this quality exist within me? Perhaps in shadow form. What would integration of this quality look like? When you reclaim these projected aspects, you not only heal yourself, but transform your relationships. What once triggered defensiveness becomes an opportunity for compassion, both for yourself and others. 7. The lie of toughness. Being strong doesn't mean being unaffected. It means being aware, being fully present with your emotions and still choosing with clarity. You don't need thicker armor, you need deeper roots. There's a kind of softness that doesn't collapse. There's a kind of stillness that doesn't retreat. That's the power of integration. True strength isn't the absence of vulnerability, but the presence of courage. It's not about feeling less, but about containing more. The oak tree doesn't resist the wind, it bends with it, rooted so deeply that even in the fiercest storm, it remains standing. This is what Jung meant by wholeness. Not perfection, not invulnerability, but the capacity to include all of your experience without being overwhelmed by any part of it. The strongest people you'll ever meet aren't those who've never been wounded. They're those who've been shattered and had the courage to piece themselves back together, conscious of every break, honoring every scar. They don't deny their pain. They transform it. They don't hide their sensitivity. They channel it. They don't armor their hearts. They expand them. This is the paradox. True strength comes not from hardening, but from deepening. Not from closing, but from opening more fully to life, knowing you can bear whatever comes, not because you're invulnerable, but because you're infinitely resilient. 8. Integration equals immunity. What you accept loses its power to hurt you. When you bring your wounds into the light, they stop being weapons and start becoming wisdom. This is the kintsugi of the mind, healing with gold instead of hiding the breaks. Imagine if your most broken moment became your most powerful story. Because when you own your narrative, no one can use it against you. Integration doesn't mean your wounds disappear. It means they transform from liabilities into assets, from sources of shame into sources of connection. The Japanese art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, highlighting rather than hiding the breaks. Your healed wounds can become your most beautiful features, radiating with the gold of hard-won wisdom. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This terror isn't because we're inherently flawed, but because we've been taught to reject crucial parts of our experience. Integration means bringing all parts of yourself to the table, the light and the dark, the loved and the rejected, the celebrated and the shamed. It means saying to each aspect of your experience, you belong here too. When someone tries to shame you for something you've already embraced, their words find no purchase. When they try to reject a part of you that you've already welcomed home, their rejection becomes irrelevant. This is true immunity, not imperviousness to pain, but complete ownership of your response to it. 9. Depth brings stability. Avoidance creates anxiety. Depth builds stability. The people who seem unshakable aren't empty. They're grounded. Because they've faced their darkness, they've stared into their shame and refused to look away. They've been abandoned and chose not to abandon themselves. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. Think of a mountain. Its stability doesn't come from avoiding storms, but from having roots that go deeper than any weather. The same is true for you. Your unshakability comes not from controlling your environment, but from anchoring yourself in truth. Jung observed that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. We distract ourselves with busyness, numb ourselves with addictions, project our disowned qualities onto others, anything to avoid the journey inward. But those who take this journey discover something remarkable. The very depth they feared becomes their greatest stability. By diving into the ocean of their unconscious, they find not just monsters but treasures, not just wounds, but wisdom. When you know your depths, surface disturbances lose their power to destabilize you. When you've faced your greatest fear, everyday anxieties become manageable. When you've held your darkest shame in the light of compassion, others' judgments no longer define you. This stability isn't rigidity. It's the flexible strength that comes from self-knowledge so thorough that nothing about yourself can surprise or overwhelm you anymore. The shadow is not the enemy. It's the unacknowledged ally. The part of you that sabotages your peace may be trying to protect you from shame, rejection, heartbreak. Jung taught, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But that is also the path to freedom. And here's the truth. Your shadow doesn't want control. It wants integration. It wants to stop screaming through your triggers and finally be heard in peace. Your inner critic that seems so harsh, it developed to protect you from external criticism by getting there first. The part that pushes people away, it's trying to shield you from the pain of rejection by rejecting first. Even your self-sabotage is a misguided attempt at self-protection, keeping you from heights from which you might fall. These parts aren't your enemies. They're wounded allies using outdated strategies. They're like loyal soldiers still fighting a war that ended long ago, unaware that peace has been declared. Jung called this process individuation. the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the personality. It's not about eliminating any part of yourself, but about bringing all parts into conscious relationship. Speak to your shadow aspects as you would to frightened children or wounded friends. Ask them, what are you trying to protect me from? What do you need to feel safe? How can I honor your intention while finding healthier strategies? When you approach your shadow with curiosity rather than judgment, something miraculous happens. The very qualities that once tormented you become sources of wisdom, creativity, and authentic power. But here's where most people retreat. When you hear this, something inside you might resist it. That's exactly where your power lives. This is the turning point, but only if you stay with it. When your body tenses, when you want to click away, pause. What you resist is usually the edge of your evolution. The moment when discomfort rises, when you feel that familiar urge to distract yourself, to intellectualize, to dismiss, that's the threshold of transformation. The very resistance you feel is evidence you're touching something true. As Jung wrote, there is no birth of consciousness without pain. The resistance isn't a sign to turn back. It's confirmation you're on the right path. Stay here, in this discomfort. Breathe into it. Watch how it moves through your body without acting on the impulse to escape. This is the practice of presence that builds your capacity for truth. If your chest feels tight, if your breath has changed, if your mind is searching for an escape right now, stay. You're not broken for feeling discomfort. You're awakening. Notice what's happening in your body as you hear these words. The slight tension in your shoulders, the subtle shift in your posture, the almost imperceptible change in your breathing. Your body is speaking to you right now. It's telling you what matters, what resonates, what needs attention. This bodily wisdom is what Jung called the somatic unconscious, the way your deepest knowing expresses itself through physical sensation before conscious understanding. Don't rush past this moment. Don't dismiss these signals. They are the language of your soul, communicating in the most honest way it knows how. You don't become immune by being invincible. You become immune by being honest. Honest about what hurt you. Honest about what still does. That's where your power is. In the moment you decide not to run from your story anymore, but to read it all the way through. You are not your pain. You are the one strong enough to hold it. This is the paradox at the heart of shadow integration. What you resist persists, but what you embrace transforms. The wound you refuse to acknowledge keeps bleeding, but the wound you tend with consciousness begins to heal. Jung described this process as making the darkness conscious. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Integration doesn't mean your wounds disappear or that painful events unhappen. It means you develop a new relationship with them, one where you're no longer defined by what happened to you, but by how you responded, what you learned, how you grew. When you face your shadow with courage and compassion, something extraordinary happens. The very experiences that once threatened to destroy you become the foundation of your authentic power. Not because the pain wasn't real, not because the injustice wasn't wrong, but because you refused to let that be the end of your story. You were never weak for feeling. You were wounded for not being allowed to. The people who mocked your sensitivity, they were terrified of their own. You can feel everything and still choose peace. You can acknowledge your shadows and still radiate light. You are not broken, you're becoming. The most powerful people you know have cried in silence. They've loved people who didn't love them back. They've forgiven things no one apologized for. And they've chosen to keep going, not because they forgot the pain, but because they integrated it. There is a strength that comes not from denial, but from depth. not from avoidance, but from acceptance, not from hardening your heart, but from holding it open even after it's been broken. Jung recognized this when he wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Your wounds don't disqualify you from greatness, they prepare you for it. Your sensitivity isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Your struggles aren't punishment, they're initiation. Every ancient tradition understood that transformation requires descent before ascent. The hero must enter the underworld before emerging with the treasure. The seed must break open in darkness before reaching toward light. You're not failing at life when you struggle. You're not doing it wrong when you feel deeply. You're human, gloriously, messily, powerfully human. And your humanity, all of it, the light and the shadow, is your gift to a world drowning in pretense. And when someone tries to hurt you again, when they use words like weapons or silence like punishment, you will no longer flinch. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because you know where it ends. In you, you've seen your shadow, you've held your wounds, you've walked through your fire, and now, nothing and nobody can control you again, not because they've changed, because you have. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." You're not just healing, you're evolving. The wound is where the light enters you. And when you've been cracked open by life, filled with light, and healed yourself with gold, you don't just return to wholeness, you become something far more powerful. A beacon for others still finding their way through darkness. This is the final paradox. When you heal what hurts you, you gain the power not just to free yourself, but to help free others. Welcome back.